So I would like to hand over to Janine now. Please write all your questions in the chat and we'll come back afterwards to ask her the questions. Over to you, Janine.
Thank you so much for having me. In my teaching experience, bullying behavior has come up quite often, and we have a zero tolerance for bullying at our school, but I wanted to deal with it more effectively, and I put a plan together that really worked for me. So I'm keen to share it with you, and I'm hoping some of this material will resonate with you and be useful. So my objectives for the students were to identify the problem of bullying and to make them more aware of the choices they make with relevant case studies, and then to understand the importance of early intervention, of tackling it early. So I do teach grade 9 English and history, but we'll start off with the question. Linda, slide. Can you define bullying? Would anyone like to just have a go in the chat? Anyone like to give a definition of bullying? Yes, picking on individuals, inflicting violence and harsh words, absolutely, all those sort of things. Violence towards students can be. So let's have a look. Harassing is a good verb. So let's have a look at, Linda, at one good definition. Bullying is deliberately hurtful behavior that is repeated over a period of time. It's teasing, leaving someone out, talking behind their backs, ridiculing them, mimicking them, humiliating them, embarrassing them, that sort of thing. Next, Linda. Have you seen any examples of bullying? And not in the staff room, because I know there are bullies there as well sometimes, but in your classes. Can you comment in the chat? Just a yes or no would do. Have you seen examples? Thanks, Rose. Body shaming, yes, yes. So, well, I'm glad. So now what we're going to have a look at here is how we can, as teachers, can help deal with the problem in our English lessons. So, Linda, next. So here we have a sketch of a bullying incident. And typically, there's a victim. Can you have a look at, in the sketch, what number would be the victim, represent the victim? Absolutely, Doreen, 2. And then we have a perpetrator, a perp, the actual guy doing the bullying. What number would that be? The bully. Thank you, Samia, 3. Now, most often there's somebody who's watching, a bystander. Who would the bystander be? Thanks, Anthony. Absolutely. Number 4. And from time to time, we have somebody who's brave enough to help the bully and who can be called an upstander. And that's definitely number 1. Thanks, Catherine. So now I just want to tell you how it sort of came to a head for me. There was a lovely boy in my class called Joe, and he was absent from school for a couple of days. And when I asked where he was, the class told me that he'd been suspended from school for fighting. No, he was a lovely child, not a fighty type. So when he came back to the classroom, I asked him what had happened. And he stood up in the class and he said that he'd arrived at the school in the middle of grade 8. And he said there was one guy, we'll just call him the guy, who continuously gave him a hard time. Little things like ridiculing him, mimicking him, leaving him out, constantly on his case. And Joe's friends weren't much help. They said, oh, the guy's a good basketball player, just ignore him. And they didn't know why he picked on Joe all the time. So Joe says he Googled for help. And he found that the advice was to stand up to bullies, because bullies apparently are really cowards at heart. And so one should stand up to him. So then the incident came to a head when they were off to basketball practice. And the guy ran his nails down Joe's leg and was laughing and saying that he had ashy, dry skin. There was a word, pashela or something that they used for us, which was quite insulting. So Joe stood up and he shouldered the guy, and a fight ensued, and they were both hauled off to the headmaster's office and suspended, because we have a zero tolerance for this kind of thing. So I said to Joe, so I asked him, did standing up for the bully work for you? And he said, absolutely not. He said, my parents were so disappointed and upset. I was suspended. It will be on my record. I was in huge trouble. Never again. He said, I will never stand up to a bully again. Now, this is a very poor outcome, that he's learned that he should never stand up against bullies. So that's when we decided that we must unpack this behavior and find out what went wrong. How can we get a better outcome? So I asked the boys, Linda, what should we do? And one of them suggested that Joe should never have got physical, and we all agreed. But then when I asked them what he should have done, what should have happened, now there weren't so many answers. And somebody suggested he should have told the teacher. Well, that just got the whole class laughing. They said it never worked. And then there were all sorts of stories about what had happened to them when they told the teacher, and they were called a snitch, and it never ended well. So there were a lot of stories about that. So I gave them this worksheet, Linda. Not worksheet, but a little thing. I said, which of these resonates with you? Okay, telling the teacher. It's the wise thing to do. It really helps a lot. It doesn't work. Teachers never really see the bullying. The bullying is sometimes a big hero at sports. You get called a snitch at school, and then life isn't worth living. And telling the teacher never really ends well. And they all had to fill in 3 or 4. And they'd filled in most of the things, but very few, in one class, none wrote number 2. It helps quite a lot. And one of them even said, telling the teacher is useless at dealing with bullying. So now I said, well, you must understand that some teachers, we might have 150 boys we see every day, and we just cannot keep up with exactly the nuances of bullying and what happens. And I said, the thing is as well, it's not just the teacher's responsibility. Bullying doesn't stop at the end of school. We have to learn to deal with it. So we had a look at some pictures of bullying incidents, Linda. Here we can see, just to show them that it doesn't stop. We can see the perpetrators there and the little victim there. Next. And here again, we can obviously see who the victim is, Linda, and the perpetrators. And the last one. And there's another little one, and we can see the perpetrators, we can see the victim, And there are two little boys on either side. They are watching, we can call them bystanders. Now, then we did this, we got together to do this think, pair, share exercise, where you've got to think the answer, Linda, and you tell your partner. And I said, okay, think of a time when you saw someone being bullied, and you intervened and helped them. So you were an upstander. You really tried to help. And tell your partner about it. And then, does anyone want to share? And there were quite a lot of stories about how they'd helped people, and it was a really nice exercise to do. But I did ask them to mention an incident where you saw someone being bullied and you didn't do anything at all, but I didn't ask them to share. That was, it's a bit much. But then in grade 9, in South Africa, on the curriculum, it's World War II and the Holocaust. So it was a good cross-curricular opportunity to use a picture. I found a brilliant picture from the Holocaust. Linda? Okay, now the Holocaust is a genocide against the Jews in Europe during World War II. And a genocide is a planned, systematic murder of a specific group of people. So it's not like somebody madman going into a shopping center and just gunning down various people. A genocide is planned, systematic. You want to get rid of one group. Next. And this is the picture I used. Now, this picture, it's a primary source from World War II, and it was taken in 1933 in Austria, where the Nazis moved into Austria, and as they did so, they pulled Jewish shopkeepers out of their shops and made them scrub the street, sometimes with a toothbrush. How were they trying to make them feel? Anyone? Belittled, exactly. Embarrassed, frustrated, humiliated, and lonely and powerless. Now, can we see who the victims are in this picture? Linda, are there any little arrows? I thought I'd put arrows. Oh, yes. Okay, we can see the victims very clearly. Now, next arrows, Linda. Who are these guys? Are they victims, perpetrators? These are actually the Nazis. They are the perpetrators. Okay, so they did the bullying. And Linda, the people at the back, what are they doing? What are they doing? Yeah, they are watching. They are watching. They are the bystanders. They are watching. They're not really doing anything, but they're watching. Now, by standing there all and watching this incident, who are they empowering? Are they empowering the perpetrators, or are they empowering the victims? By standing and watching. Thanks, Jose.
The perpetrators.
They are empowering the perpetrators. And so we see that just by standing by and watching an incident of bullying, we are actually empowering the perpetrators. And so we must understand that every time we see an act of bullying in our lives and we just watch, gather around and watch and do nothing, we are empowering the perpetrators. And that's quite a powerful lesson. Now, from this picture, you are watching the bystanders. we can't tell what they're thinking. I mean, some of them might be laughing and thinking this is funny or hilarious, and some of them might really be horrified and think this is terrible. We don't, this is not, we think this is awful. Or it might even be your aunt or your cousin who has to scrub the streets. So we can't tell what they're thinking, but we can tell what they're doing. So those who think that it's awful, what's happening, why do you think they don't try and stop the Nazis? Is there any reason you can think of why they don't stop the Nazis if they didn't agree with it and they were horrified? Exactly. The fear. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Ibrahim. For those who don't support it, they are scared, and rightly so, because if they did something, if they told the Nazis to stop, they might be the next target. And that's often why we don't stand up to bullies, because quite honestly, we're scared that we will be the next target. So we understand why they don't. But if we were there, just say that we were part of that group watching this happen, and we didn't agree with it, is there anything you can think of that we might have done so that we were upstanders and not bystanders, so that we weren't empowering the Nazis? Can you think of anything that you might have done? Any ideas? Walk away. Thank you. At least walk away. That would be the best thing. Intervene. Move away is something. But, I might like to tell them to stop, to say, stop it, you Nazis, but I would be far too scared because, but, my family, I might be arrested. My family could lose their jobs. There's a whole lot of repercussions. One of my pupils suggested that if, they're young and fit, they could have shouted an anti-Nazi slogan and run like hell. And another one, which was quite good, said, oh, maybe you should kneel down with the victims and scrub with them. And that I thought was very sweet because it would make the victims feel less lonely. And isolated. But that despite the fear, there were a lot of people who actually risked their lives and did try to help those Jewish victims. And I want to give you a couple of examples. Linda? This is the Veseli family from Albania, and they are pictured just after the war with some Jewish people that they saved during the war. They hid them at enormous personal cost to them. They dressed the woman up in Muslim gear, and when they knew there was a raid coming, they sent the men into the forest. So this was a family who went out of their way and risked their lives to save some Jewish people. And years later, when they were interviewed and asked why they chose to help these victims, Mr. Veseli said, well, he didn't really think about it. It wasn't really a choice. There were people who were in danger and they needed help, and that's just what they did. And this is very interesting because we wonder why some people helped and some people didn't. But he said that it wasn't even a choice for him. Of course they would help. Next picture, please. This is a group of children that in the middle there's Pastor André Trocme from a French village in Chambon in France, a small farming community, and there's his wife above him. And these are a whole group of children that he and a small farming community saved at great personal risk. And next picture, Linda. This is them years and years later. Those are the very children from the picture above, some of them who lived to a ripe old age, thanks to Pastor Trokme, this Christian village in the middle of Chambon. And when he was interviewed and asked why him and his farming village right in the rural areas of France risked their lives, he said, well, of course, people needed help. That's what we do. It wasn't a choice. And that was also very interesting. We'll get to that later. Now, these stories, the children got to know quite well in my class because I'd done one as a written comprehension, and I used the next story as a listening comprehension. Okay, now, here's the third example, the final example. This is my favorite, Linda. This is a German soldier who, during World War II, his name is Hugo Armand. And he was German, he loved Germany, and he was proud to fight for his country. And he was sent to the Eastern Front, fight against the Russians, and he was wounded, and he was sent back to recover, and he found himself in Poland, and he got an army job giving railway tickets, organizing railway tickets to German soldiers going from Germany to the Eastern Front via Poland and then back again. And he, as I said, he loved Germany and he loved fighting for his country and defending it. But while he was in Poland, he noticed ghettos and concentration camps, and he was horrified. He loved Germany, but not this. And he felt that he had to do something. And so, I mean, he would have been shot if caught, but he just helped a Jewish woman and her family by secretly getting them to the forest, and where hopefully they could find the resistance. And later he took in his army vehicle some other guys, and he even gave them some rifles so that they could hunt rabbits or whatever in the winter. And then this is him many years later, Linda. There he is. And he was interviewed, and he said he'd been scared, but he said, I did little, but if many had done their little, it would have added up too much. Linda? There, I did little, but if many had done their little, it would have added up too much. And this really resonated with me. And I thought the challenge was for us all, when we see bullying, we know we're not brave enough. We know we're scared. We don't want to be the target. We know we can't conquer it always, but to try and find our little so that we are upstanders. So I divided them up into groups. Linda? I divided them up into groups of 5 or 6, and I gave all of them a real life bullying scenario. And each group had to discuss this scenario and decide why the behavior was not good, what they could do about it, what are the choices, why they might not, and to try and come up with a little that they could do. And I told them that this was going to be an count for their impromptu oral mark. So each member of the group had to speak, even if it was only a sentence or 2. And let's have a look at some of the groups, Linda. And obviously this can be changed to depend on what kind of bullying scenarios you come up with for your area. But things like the popular wing scored the winning try or the winning goal in the first team's game on Saturday. He's a hero. Even the teachers admire him. He's generally pleasant, and you want to be friends with him. At the same time, you've noticed that he's always down on one of the guys, needling him, mimicking him, belittling him, and you can see the victim is miserable. So that group had to go and work out why this behavior is not good. How would it make the victim feel? What could we do about it? What are our choices? Why might we not act positively? And they had to try and come up with a little, because we know nobody's going to go to the big wing and tell them to stop. So we have to find our little. Next one. And then things like, as you're going up the stairwell, you notice some guys shouldering a student, calling him a coward and a wuss. And another group got the prettiest, most popular girl in your class, often harasses one of your classmates. She rolls her eyes when the student speaks, talks over her, and always leaves her out. So they each had to decide why it's not good and come and report back. And, you know, we got some really good responses. This was the heart of the whole workshop. It is actually. I couldn't believe how effective the results were. Linda, the next one. A girl in your class has a strong accent or a speech impediment. One of your friends keeps mimicking her, and you can see it upsets her. And the last one. One of your classmates makes a racist joke. Everyone laughs. Now, you know, it was hard, this discussion. They said, oh, if you say, stop doing that, they'll say, oh, you know, don't you have a sense of humor? I'm only joking. Some of my best friends are. So we had to really discuss this one. And one student said, at the very least, I can make a vow and a promise to myself that I will never tell a racist joke. And I thought that was brilliant. And there were other examples, like sometimes you can't, you know, you can, if you're sitting next to a perpetrator on the school bus, maybe you can have a private chat to him. There were all kinds of excellent results from this. And I was really, really happy. Next one, Linda. So, but these, you know, it's not easy. We came across quite a few stumbling blocks, and one of them was we cannot classify people. We can't. Somebody who is a bully at school might be a victim at home and bullied there. So we can't classify people. In fact, we have hundreds of opportunities every day to make good choices. And these choices might even be, you know, we get home from school and our mother greets us and says, hello, how was your day? And a little choice, we can either grunt and moan and make her feel miserable too, or we can smile and say, hi, Mom, you look gorgeous. How was your day? And make her smile and beam and, you know, that's my child. So every little choice we make has consequences, and we have hundreds of opportunities every day. And Anne Frank wrote a lovely quote. She said, how wonderful it is that nobody need to wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. So we all know that we've, as students or even as adults, that we've bullied before, but we can sort of make a promise to examine our behavior a little bit more in the future. Next slide. So we got back to the original question here. Now, what could have been done to change Joe's situation? And this is where I know that it was effective. Because instead of saying, Joe should have done this, he shouldn't have done that, now it was, we could have, I could have, perhaps I could have done this. And there were all kinds of other scenarios which made me realize that practicing good choices and having a better look at the situation really did help. Now, along the way, there was, you know, we encouraged the class to be very authentic, and to ask the real questions. But then they do ask the real questions, and they're not easy to field. Let me just show you some of the questions that what came up. Next slide. Okay, why is it important to make the right choices? Some guys didn't thought, no, put them all up, Linda. Let's have a look. Why must we do the right thing? It's easier not to bother. What's in it for me? It's none of my business. And I don't want to be a snitch, was the other one. Okay, so now these are real questions. You know, I want to be dismissive and say, well, of course you have to make the right choice. The Bible says, everyone's religion says we must. But I had to come up with something better. And so I had to work on this for quite a while. But I did come up with some very good reasons. And what's the next slide, Linda? Oh, yeah. So because we studied genocide, you know, and some years ago, even the Rwandan genocide was on our history syllabus. And this is the pyramid of hate. And no group of people wakes up one morning and decides that they want to annihilate and go and murder a whole lot of people. That doesn't happen. How it happens, there's this pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid are attitudes of prejudice, like stereotyping and scapegoating and not challenging, belittling jokes. Those are attitudes of prejudice. And if they become acceptable behavior in our classrooms, in our communities, then it's easy for us to move on to acts of prejudice. Social exclusion, social avoidance, slurs, ridicule, name-calling, telling belittling jokes. And if this becomes acceptable, and if we don't challenge this, then we can move up the ladder to discrimination, and then to violence, and finally to genocide. But genocide doesn't happen. It's just overnight. It starts down here. It starts down here. And so one good reason for stopping this early bullying in our little zones, where it's our classroom, our family, our community, is that we make it so much less likely for a genocidal situation to happen in our communities. And then, so that was one good reason why we have to act. And then the question came up, you know, I wondered, why did some people stand up and help? Why were they upstanders while others didn't? You know, they might have all been the same religion. Or why did that happen? And after thinking about it for a long time, I came across, Linda, the next slide. A philosopher and historian, Hannah Arendt, and she sort of addressed this question. And according to Hannah Arendt, we are trying unconsciously to work out our identities. Who am I? Am I cool? Am I popular? Am I respected? They listen to me or don't they? Am I rated? Especially in adolescence, this happens. We try and work out our identity by bouncing off others, see how our peers respond to us. And she says that every time we make a good choice, a kind choice, we identify ourselves as being quite good. And that motivates us to make another good choice and another good choice. And this kind of starts cementing into a positive identity, a positive self-image, and motivates us to do more until the right choice is not a choice at all. It's a habit. And it becomes who we are. And I thought to myself, that's why the Veseli family, the guys in Chambon, when I interviewed and asked, why did they make this choice? They said, no, it wasn't a choice. It's who we are. And so that really resonated. But unfortunately, if we get positive, you know, if we positive feedback from negative behavior, from being mean, then the meanness, that kind of thing, bullying becomes a habit too. So we have to watch that. So Yeah, and then we had to deal with respect a lot, because you see, when we went through our scenarios, there was a tendency, some guys would say, okay, we saw this bully, I could get my mates together and we could go and sort him out. Now, that is the exact wrong answer. And we had to understand that then what we would be being perpetrators and not upstanders, and that we always had to treat everybody with respect. And that didn't go down so well. Why should we treat everyone with respect? And I said, because we want to live in communities with respect. We want people in our class to respect us, our friends. So we need a respectful community. And they sort of agreed with that. And I said, so do we think that everyone should be treated with respect? And they all said, absolutely, yes. And I said, well, how about a thief or a robber? And, you know, in South Africa, now and again, we've had little problems with xenophobia, you know, or a foreigner. Oh, no, they weren't so sure. A thief and a robber shouldn't be treated with respect. So I said, actually, we do have to, you know, we might have to confine them and they lose some rights, but we have to treat them respectfully. Anyway, so I asked them, what or who is the highest authority in our country, in our land? What or who is the highest authority? Can anybody give me an answer? What or who is the highest authority in our land? I'll just write it in the chat. Anyone want to just, you know, take a chance, be brave? The highest authority in our country? Well, I'll tell you, okay. I thought it was the president, but actually the highest authority in the land is the Constitution. In all of our countries, it tends to be the Constitution. The Constitution is higher than the president or the prime minister. The Constitution is there to stop any unscrupulous leaders. And so, for example, a leader can't come and say, well, from tomorrow, there's a law saying that, you know, women must stay at home and not work, only the men are allowed to work, because that would be unconstitutional. So it would be illegal. He can't do that because of the Constitution. So, and we all have brilliant constitutions in place. Linda, can I have the next slide? Okay, in South Africa, for example, we have South African's constitution is known for emphasizing human rights, and Chapter 2, the Bill of Rights, it says everyone has inherent dignity and the right to have their dignity respected and protected. So we see everyone and respected, everyone, not just South Africans or the rich or everyone. Next, Linda, let's just go through them, because Kenya's is the same, every person. Namibia's is the same, the dignity of all persons. Rwanda, respect for human dignity. And the next, we see Zimbabwe, the constitution says every person, dignity respected. Tanzania, every person, respect. Ethiopia, everyone, respect. Senegal, respect all individuals. And these are just Googled for these. So we know that speaking respectfully, treating everyone respectfully is the law, and it's the highest law of the land. So next slide, please, Linda. Okay, so then, the importance of early intervention were, just in summary, the path to genocide, that pyramid of hate. We've got to prevent genocide from happening in our communities, establishing our identity so that our community, our group, are all reliable and respectful if possible, and because it's our constitutional responsibility. And then after the whole workshop, I sort of got them to write a paragraph about which one resonated with them most, and which one do they think is most important and why? And was there anything that changed their attitudes? And my students were able to articulate some really good, thoughtful answers. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm really keen to field any questions if you have. But I hope that there is something in that content that is useful. Linda, over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Janine. I think it's such a great thing when people link teaching English to other areas of the curriculum, because it makes English come alive, doesn't it? And it makes it real. And those cross-curricular links are excellent. We can do it with any subject, can't we? But this is an example of English with history that really works well and is so powerful. And what I loved about that was the practical outcomes and the way that it actually worked. And you showed how it worked with your class. Wonderful outcome, that. And I love the way that we can use English and being English teachers for good to help our communities, our world. Excellent ideas. I think while we're dealing with some questions, if anyone else has any other examples from history that they can put in the chat and things that they would use for this. And I just wanted to go over a couple of articles and lesson plans that you can use from the British Council materials. You'll get the access to the slides later, but have a look at this. And here's a lesson plan in the middle here for secondary learners that you could just take from the British Council Teaching English resources, and a lesson plan for primary students. So this might help you into this topic. Lots of short videos to show as well. And then as takeaway tips, we'd all really like you to think about bullying, think about the topic. I'm sure you won't be able to not think after Janine's lovely webinar here. Think about bullying and what you can do to help, because your context might be completely different. Talk about bullying in your school with other teachers. Someone might have another insight. Watch closely what happens. Think about the procedures you've got. Relate the idea of bullying with some sort of local or regional event in history, and try out some of Janine's ideas. This idea of the little we can do, which was great. There's going to be a follow-up Telegram discussion group on Friday, so please think about all those things before Friday and you can carry on with the discussion. But for now, we've got some time for some of the questions, and I have written down some of the questions that people have asked. Are you ready for the questions, Janine?
I am.
Excellent. Right, one interesting question. Do gender and age have an impact on bullying, do you think? And if so, how?
Well, I think they do to a certain extent. For example, in the types of bullying, when you have co-ed schools, it might be a little bit different. Girls' schools, the type of bullying is different. And boys' schools, it's often more physical. And we have some single-sex schools in South Africa. And then adult bullying in the staff room, which I could see that there is. This is a workshop that perhaps should be done with the staff because to make them more aware, and that's completely different. So there are different types, but in its essence, it's the same thing, like a power abuse thing.
And it varies, doesn't it? Yeah. Somebody asked, can you explore the concept of trauma from the point of view of the victims? Have you ever done that?
Yes, well, I Googled it, okay, but that's not my area. But that I was horrified. Joe's story was so mild, but there are so many stories on the internet of, like suicides, that sort of thing, or people being driven to in America, shoot up the school because of, and claiming to have been bullied. And so there's a lot, but you can really ruin someone's childhood and self-esteem and scar them for forever. But as I say, there is a great deal. I didn't delve into that because it wasn't relevant to, but I did read some. There's a brilliant movie on bullying that can be used. It's called The Bully or something.
Great. Okay, so that's something else we can explore, isn't it? And something obviously that's important and related. How can you make a victim realize their responsibilities? And how do we encourage their voice? How do we encourage them to speak up? Any idea about that?
Well, they are often at their wits' end of what to do, like Joe was. And so my message was actually it's a community thing. We have to be aware as a group, say as a staff in the staff room, we have to start being aware as a school in our family so that our communities start acting a little bit better, a little bit better. I think the victim is he's without too much power. You know, he can try his best, but it's very difficult to work on your own. That's why we need the whole community. That's why the class needs the workshop.
You're right, isn't it? It's a group thing, isn't it? And when
It's a group
everyone's
thing.
involved, it's a power of the group rather than the
Mm,
power of the
mm,
individual. And it
mm.
takes some time as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Somebody asked, what's the rationale behind the behavior of the perpetrator? So I suppose why do some people bully? Any ideas about that?
No, not really. You know, there are so many. There's quite a lot of reasons, and you know, some people say, "Oh, they've been bullied, they've been abused," and sometimes it's just people, just say adolescents, trying to strut their power, trying to use it. You know, and the things of bullying are so vast. You know, sometimes. There's some boys who have more school lunch money and some who don't have any, but one or two choose to try and coerce the money out by bullying, you know, a youngster. That's I've come across, and that's terrible. And it's just because they can, they're bigger, they're stronger, and they use that bullying, you know, so it's like a power thing. But I'm short of answers there.
And I suppose teenagers are exploring their own power, aren't they? And
Oh,
the power of the group and everything. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Very complex, isn't it? But you guided us through it with these
Mhm.
practical steps, which is great. Somebody asked, what laws can you suggest to protect physically disabled pupils or pupils with visual or hearing impairments from bullying in schools? I don't know. Is that possible to suggest?
You know,
The laws exist, as you said, but what can we do?
well, it wasn't so much a law thing, it's an attitude thing. So we had to delve into our class. Now we decided as a class that we made this oath of what we were promised to ourselves we weren't going to do, and we signed it, and there were a whole lot of various steps. But we sort of realized that of the 35, 40 kids in the class, we don't love them all. Okay. Some of them are irritating, some of them are nerds, they said. But we must get to think that they are irritations, they're our nerds. Once they're in our zone, we have to look after them and treat them respectfully. And that's one of the messages. So it wasn't a law thing, it must be an attitude thing. And we must, so that could be a case study. You know, that would be a brilliant case study for one of those case studies. You know, we have, because our schools in South Africa, mine, haven't been that inclusive. They haven't had lots of wheelchair cases and people with physical abilities. So when one sees one treats them differently, almost as if they are not human, you know, and so if we had more inclusion, it would be easier. It would be part of society. And if they've grown up with them in junior school, they're more accepting. So it's really, we have to draw attention to our attitude, and that could just be one of the bullying scenarios that we discussed in detail. You know, the boys did, why, or the girls, the class did, why it's a good, why we were upsetting them, how do they feel, that sort of thing, I think.
I think you're right. And it's this idea of raising awareness of inclusion and of including everybody and everyone being equal and respecting
Yeah,
everyone. All this work we do is bound to influence the amount of bullying, maybe.
yeah, yeah.
There was a question, do you think we can, or how can we involve school counsellors if we have them in our schools? Can they be involved, do you think?
Well, I think this, you know, if this workshop didn't lend itself to English, or then I think the counselor would be a perfect person to do these lessons, because in South Africa, we have life orientation, which would be a perfect subject for them to do it, but they don't. So I did it because, you know, the thing about English teachers is that you could choose largely, you can choose your own material. You can choose your comprehensions, your, you know, orals, you can choose the material that you use. And so I did. But school counselors, they should go through this, and perhaps it would help. I don't know.
And also your suggestion of doing a workshop like this with teachers as well. So the more teachers are aware, then the more students are going to be aware as well, aren't they?
The
Yeah.
school counselor could do it with the teachers, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. And then general questions at the end. How can we reduce bullying in our schools, institutions? How can we prevent bullying? Is there any magical prevention that we can do?
You know, I had one picture, but of a bullying that happened in, I think, just after photography was invented. It was so old. So there doesn't seem to be magic, because it's a problem that it just keeps repeating year after year, generation after generation. So I think there's no magic bullet, but there is certainly, we can reduce it in our area by having a really good look at case studies and drawing people's attention to the choices they're actually making and their behavior.
Great, great
Make them
idea.
more thoughtful.
Yeah, yeah. And then another question. Sometimes teachers are bullied. I know you didn't. You said you weren't going to approach that question. But what can we do to reduce this idea of students bullying teachers? Any ideas on that?
No, and you know, it can be quite dangerous, quite honestly, you know, because teachers' hands are tied. You know, there's a limit to what we can do. There really is. But perhaps if we talked about bullying in general, it would just diffuse into by osmosis. They would.
I think you're probably right. It's raising the question, isn't it? And
It's
yeah.
raising the question of considering our behavior, of considering it and our choices. Yeah.
I think that's all the questions that I've noted down from the chat.
Thanks.
We've just got a couple of minutes left. If maybe one person has another question they'd like to ask, we can unmute them. If anybody wants to put their hand up with any other questions. Or do you have any final words for us, Janine?
No, not really. You know, I just hope that that there was something beneficial, that there was anything that, you know, that rang true for them or that resonated with them. I would be so delighted.
One person with a raised hand, Jamilu Ahmad Kwari. Okay, so one last question. Would you like to unmute, Jamilu?
Jamilu?
Unmute?
Yes, I unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask your question.
Yes, can you hear me now, please?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I was now first. Well done, the presenter. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Let me go direct to the question. There are instances whereby the bullies tends to say that they are joking. You know, in that case, please, what is the difference between actual bully and jokes that have been done?
That is such a good question, because it came up. It's one of the questions that came up. And, you know, we started realizing that one of the things when they say, oh, I was only joking, it's almost like a red flag. It's bullying. It's not joking. You know, it's at somebody's expense. And
Please mute everyone else.
and it's always at somebody's expense, and then it's not a joke, it's hurtful. And you know, very seldom, usually in our heart of hearts, we know where it was or wasn't. Okay. And It's like with racist jokes, the same thing. You know, I was only joking. Oh, red flag. You know, at whose expense were you joking? And it's wonderful to make jokes about yourself. But as soon as you make jokes about somebody else, it's not on. It really isn't.
No, you're right. You're right.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
thank you. Thank you. Lovely answer. And I'm afraid we don't have any time for any more questions now, but anyone else who has questions, please come to the Telegram follow-up discussion on Friday in the Telegram group, and everyone can discuss the answers there. So thank you so much, Janine, for that. Wonderful topic, wonderfully presented, wonderful, powerful stories, and lots of wonderful comments in the chat as well.